Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep into New Zealand.
No,
It's a place a lot of people think they know, from movies and such. But
right.
we're gonna really dig in using the Wikipedia page as our guide.
Yeah, I think people might be surprised by some of what we find. It's a
Absolutely.
fascinating country.
Okay, well, let's start with the basics. The name New Zealand. Most people probably don't know it actually comes from a Dutch province.
Zealand, that's right.
Zealand, yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny little connection there. You think of New Zealand so far away,
Right.
but that first European explorer, Abel Tasman, he called it Statenland originally.
Oh, wow.
But then those Dutch map makers, they uh,
They had other ideas.
they had other ideas, and Nova Zealandia, that's what ended up on the map.
It makes you wonder how different things might have been if they'd kept that first name Statenland.
Right, totally.
And while we're talking about names, the Maori name Aotearoa, it means land of the long white cloud.
Beautiful name.
It is beautiful, but it originally was just for the North Island, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't until pretty recently, 2013, that the official English names for the North and South Islands were really like set in stone.
Hmm. It's interesting how these names, they really tell a story about how people see the land,
Oh, absolutely, about identity and how that changes over time.
Okay, so before Tasman and those Dutch ships showed up, the Maori people had already made an incredible journey to get to these islands.
Yeah, imagine that voyage,
Oh, yeah.
from Taiwan all the way to Melanesia and then finally reaching New Zealand sometime between 1280 and 1350.
Wow.
That's some serious navigation skills.
Absolutely. And courage, to just head out into the vast unknown like that.
It's incredible.
And what's really mind-boggling is they arrived right around the time of the Little Ice Age.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a challenging time to try and settle in a new place, right?
That's wild. Yeah, that really speaks to their adaptability and resilience,
Hold on.
having to build a whole new way of life in this changing environment.
They must have had incredible ingenuity and knowledge to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really puts things into perspective, hundreds of years before Europeans even arrived.
Right.
And then European contact, it brought this huge wave of change, new goods, technologies, beliefs.
Yeah, and some of those things had a really significant impact on the Maori, like potatoes and muskets.
Yeah, especially muskets.
Right, they fueled those musket wars, really devastating.
Tragic example of how sometimes cultures interacting can have these unintended consequences.
Absolutely, it's a pattern we've seen repeated through history, sadly.
And we can't forget about those introduced diseases.
Right, decimated the Maori population.
It's just a heartbreaking reminder of how vulnerable indigenous people are to those kinds of diseases.
Yeah, for sure.
So with the arrival of Europeans, of course, it set the stage for colonization and then the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840.
Big moment in their history.
Huge, right? It was supposed to give Britain control, but also, at least in theory, protect Maori rights.
Yeah, that's a document with a lot of debate swirling around it, even now.
Oh, absolutely. Interpretations and implications for Maori and the Crown that are still playing out today.
Definitely.
And of course, those disagreements over land and sovereignty, they led to the New Zealand Wars.
Another difficult chapter.
Yeah, strained relationships, displacement of communities, questions of land ownership and cultural identity that are still really present today.
Right.
So New Zealand's journey from a colony to a dominion, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, for sure. Becoming a separate colony in 1841, gaining self-governance by 1856, and then finally declared dominion in 1907.
Wow.
It's a clear sign of that growing national identity.
Yeah, that desire for self-determination.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's switch gears a bit and talk about what makes New Zealand geographically unique.
The natural beauty is just undeniable.
Oh, absolutely.
Two main islands with all this variety in the landscape.
It's incredible. You've got towering mountains, fjords, volcanoes, beaches, you name it.
You got it.
It's no wonder it's such a popular spot for filming.
Oh, yeah. It's like those landscapes were made for the big screen.
Totally. And those southern Alps.
Breathtaking.
Home to Aoraki Mount Cook, the highest peak.
Yeah, it's awe-inspiring.
So all this incredible scenery, it comes from some pretty powerful forces, right?
Oh, yeah. New Zealand's right on the boundary of the Pacific and Indo-Australian tectonic plates.
So it's a geologically active zone?
You got all those shifting plates. That's what gives you the mountains, the volcanoes, the
Yeah.
geothermal activity.
Like a living, breathing geology textbook.
Exactly. And then you've got that Taupo volcanic zone with Lake Kaupu,
Oh, yeah.
which is actually a caldera from a supervolcanic eruption thousands of years ago.
It's a good reminder that New Zealand's landscape is still being shaped by these powerful forces.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes you realize that even those landscapes that seem so stable, they're actually in constant flux.
Right.
Okay, so given this unique geography and all that isolation, it's no surprise that New Zealand has some incredible biodiversity.
Yeah, absolutely. Millions of years of isolation. That's what let evolution take its own course.
Right, so you end up with these iconic species like the kiwi.
Yeah, the flightless bird that's become a national symbol.
And other flightless birds, too?
Oh, yeah, and reptiles like the tuatara.
Oh, wow. A living fossil. Right.
Yeah, it's been around since the dinosaur age.
It's incredible.
And then all those plants you won't find anywhere else on Earth.
It's like stepping back in time.
Right.
It's incredible. But of course, with human arrival came new challenges for these native species.
Yeah. Unfortunately, predators like rats and stoats, they've really taken a toll.
So those conservation efforts, they're crucial.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant battle to protect this really unique ecosystem.
Okay, so let's shift gears again and talk about New Zealand's political landscape.
Right.
They're known for having a pretty progressive system, right?
Yeah, they have a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy. So it's this blend of tradition and representation.
Right, but what's really interesting is their commitment to fairness and equality.
Absolutely. They were pioneers in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They brought in a minimum wage early on,
And of course, the first country in the world to give women the right to vote.
a major milestone.
It really makes you wonder what factors allowed them to be so progressive back then.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, something historians are still digging into.
It's clear, though, that this commitment to social justice has really shaped their political culture.
Absolutely. And it's reflected in how they rank today for their democratic institutions and those low levels of corruption.
It's a system that clearly values transparency and participation.
For sure.
Okay, so let's talk about their economy. New Zealand's economy has gone through some pretty big changes, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. They've shifted away from those extractive industries like mining and forestry toward a more modern, service-based economy.
What do you think drove that transition?
Well, it's a mix of things, global economic trends, technology advancements, and those policy reforms in the 1980s.
You mean Rogernomics?
Exactly. Those were aimed at liberalizing the economy, reducing government intervention, and boosting free trade.
Right. I've heard the term, but I'm not really clear on the specifics or the long-term effects.
Well, it was pretty controversial at the time, but it definitely reshaped New Zealand's economy.
Okay, so what are some of the key industries driving things today?
Agriculture is still huge, especially dairy and wine. Those dairy products are world famous.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's tourism, all these incredible landscapes we talked about. They bring in tons of visitors.
Of course.
And then technology that's becoming a major player, too.
It's pretty impressive how even a relatively small island nation can be such a force in so many different industries.
Right. It's their ability to adapt and innovate that's been key to their success.
Okay, so another big transformation we have to talk about is the changing demographics of New Zealand.
Oh, yeah, it's become a much more multicultural society in recent decades, hasn't it?
Absolutely. From being mostly European, it's now got significant Maori, Asian, and Pacifica populations.
Yeah, you see that diversity everywhere in their cities, their culture, their national identity.
It's really interesting how a nation's identity can change and become more inclusive over time.
For sure.
And we can't overlook the term Kiwi.
It's more than just a bird or a fruit, right?
Right. It's become a symbol of their character.
Yeah, that resourcefulness, that can-do spirit, the love for the outdoors.
Totally. And alongside that, you've got the term Pākehā for non-Polynesian New Zealanders.
Right. It reflects that ongoing conversation about identity and belonging, in a nation grappling with its colonial past and its multicultural present.
These terms really highlight the complexities of cultural identity in a place with such a layered history.
Absolutely.
It's all part of defining what it means to be a New Zealander in the 21st century.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've gone through their history, explored their unique geography and biodiversity, and delved into their political system and those changing demographics.
It's been fascinating.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there's much more to uncover as we continue.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, this is just the beginning. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into New Zealand's cultural landscape, its economic transformations, and its impact on the global stage.
Welcome back to our deep dive into New Zealand. We keep going. One thing that really strikes me is how much they've focused on creating a fair and just society.
Yeah, we touched on that a bit in the last part, with those early progressive policies like the minimum wage and women's suffrage.
Right.
It makes you wonder how that commitment to social progress is playing out in their politics today.
Well, they consistently rank really high for their democratic institutions, and they have incredibly low levels of corruption.
Oh, wow.
So it seems like they've really dedicated themselves to transparency and accountability in their government.
That's impressive, especially when you see how much some other countries struggle with those things.
Absolutely. And their civic engagement is pretty remarkable, too. Like, their voter turnout for general elections is really high.
That's a great point. It really shows how much they believe in participating and shaping their future. Right.
But then it makes those lower turnout rates for local council elections even more curious.
Yeah, that's a strange one, isn't it? It seems like people would be more engaged at the local level where decisions have a more direct impact on their lives.
Right, exactly.
Maybe it's about how accessible and visible local politics are, or maybe people think national issues just carry more weight.
It's a fascinating question.
It is.
But regardless,
Yeah.
it's a good reminder that even with all the progress New Zealand has made, there are still challenges when it comes to true equality for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. That disparity between Maori and European populations, especially in things like socioeconomic outcomes and the justice system.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that systemic inequalities still exist.
Definitely. And the overrepresentation of Maori in conviction and imprisonment rates, that's especially concerning.
Yeah, it suggests that historical injustices are still having an impact today.
Right. It shows just how important it is to keep working towards dismantling those systems of discrimination and making sure everyone has a fair chance. Exactly, that commitment to a fair go for everyone, as they say, it requires constant effort.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to something a bit more tangible. Let's talk about New Zealand's unique cultural landscape.
All right, so one thing that I've always found fascinating about New Zealand is how they've blended those indigenous Maori traditions with the ones brought by European settlers.
It's a great example of how cultural identity is always evolving.
Exactly, through interactions and exchanges.
Right.
You can see it so clearly in Maori art and carving.
Yeah, those intricate designs and powerful symbols, they're such a big part of New Zealand's identity.
Absolutely, and there's a real resurgence of interest in Maori culture right now. With traditional crafts, language, performing arts all thriving.
It's inspiring to see how indigenous cultures can not only survive, but really flourish even in the face of colonization and globalization.
Absolutely.
It shows the resilience of the Maori people.
For sure.
And alongside those vibrant Maori traditions, you've got the influence of those European settlers in their literature, music, sports.
Right, all these elements woven together to create something uniquely Kiwi.
And speaking of Kiwi, that term really captures so much of their national character.
Yeah, doesn't it? It's that resourcefulness that can do attitude, the love of the outdoors.
It's amazing how one word can embody a whole national identity.
Right. Makes you wonder what other symbols and expressions really capture the essence of being a Kiwi.
Good question. Maybe it's that love for extreme sports and pushing boundaries, or that laid-back attitude and sense of humor.
Could be.
Whatever it is, it's definitely part of what makes New Zealand so appealing to so many people.
Agreed.
So let's talk about their contributions to the arts and entertainment world.
Right.
They've produced some incredible musicians, filmmakers, writers.
It's like that geographic isolation that shaped their biodiversity also fostered this unique creative spirit. Think about those early painters capturing the beauty of those landscapes, or the writers in the mid-20th century telling stories about their own experiences.
It's funny how sometimes limitations can actually spark creativity.
Yeah, when you have to rely on your own resources and inspiration, it can lead to something truly unique.
Totally. And in more recent decades, they've made a big impact on the world stage, too.
Absolutely. Musicians like Lord Wint finding global fame directors like Peter Jackson, making those epic films set against those stunning landscapes.
Right.
They've shown that creative talent can thrive anywhere.
Absolutely. And those landscapes definitely played a part in attracting all those international film productions.
Oh, for sure. The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Avatar.
Yeah, they were all filmed there.
Those landscapes, they became almost characters in those films.
It's a perfect example of how natural beauty can be a cultural asset.
And an economic one, too.
Yeah.
It's boosted their film industry and really put New Zealand on the map.
Absolutely. Another example of how they've used what they have to make a real impact.
For sure.
Okay, so beyond arts and entertainment, New Zealand has a pretty impressive sporting heritage, too.
Oh, yeah. Way bigger than you'd expect for a country of their size.
Rugby's the national sport, of course,
Oh.
and the All Blacks.
Legendary team.
They're known for their dominance and that iconic pre-game Haka.
Right, is this powerful display of Maori culture woven into this sport that's so central to their identity.
And their success isn't limited to rugby either.
Oh, no, they're good at all sorts. Sailing, cricket, netball, even those extreme sports we were talking about.
It's like they've channeled that adventurous spirit into athletics.
It's impressive for sure.
And let's not forget about all that quirky Kuleana.
Oh, yeah, the buzzy bees, Janels pavlova, those iconic sheep.
They've turned these everyday things into symbols of their national identity.
It's amazing how these ordinary objects can take on so much meaning.
It speaks to the power of shared experiences.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot in this second part of our deep dive. We've looked at the complexities of their politics, the richness of their culture, and their impact on the world through arts, entertainment, and sports.
We have.
What stands out to you as particularly interesting or thought-provoking?
I think it's how they've managed to blend tradition and innovation. They've honored their Maori heritage while embracing new ideas and approaching challenges with this real resilience and forward-thinking mindset.
They've shown a remarkable ability to adapt and evolve while staying true to their values. It's inspiring. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into New Zealand. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've covered so much ground.
Yeah.
Their history, geography, culture, economy, politics.
Yeah?
And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired.
Me too. It's amazing how much we found just starting with that Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
So thinking back on everything, what stands out to you?
I think it's their knack for balancing these seemingly opposite things, tradition and innovation, honoring their Maori heritage while embracing new ideas.
Right.
Navigating the after effects of colonization and building a more inclusive society.
Yeah, they definitely face challenges, but they've always shown a real willingness to adapt. It's like they've woven together all these different threads. Indigenous culture and colonial influence, rugged individualism and social responsibility, economic pragmatism, and environmental awareness.
Yeah, it's this unique and cohesive tapestry.
And they've done it while holding on to that strong sense of national identity and those core values, fairness, equality, a fair go for everyone.
Exactly. And it's even more remarkable when you consider their size and isolation.
Their early adoption of those progressive social policies, that was really impressive.
Absolutely.
Being the first to give women the right to vote, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, it really makes you think what made them so forward-thinking back then.
It does. Historians are still trying to figure that out.
Right. Some say it was the influence of strong women's suffrage movements. Others point to the pragmatism of a young nation trying to attract settlers.
It's fascinating.
Whatever the reasons, though, that legacy of progress is still alive today.
You can see it in their democratic institutions and their low levels of corruption.
Yes.
It shows a real dedication to building a fair and just society.
But like we discussed, it's a journey, and there's still work to be done, especially when it comes to those disparities between Maori and European populations.
Right. It's a reminder that true equality takes constant effort and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
For sure.
I was also really fascinated by their geography and biodiversity.
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
Millions of years of isolation created this unique ecosystem with those flightless birds and ancient reptiles.
It's like a window into another world.
It really is, and it shows how powerful nature can be.
And how important it is to protect these fragile places.
Absolutely. Climate change introduced predators, habitat loss. These are all serious threats.
They are, and New Zealand needs to keep prioritizing those conservation efforts.
Okay, and their culture, that blend of Maori traditions and European influences, is so intriguing.
Absolutely.
I'm especially drawn to the resurgence of the Maori language and culture.
It's really inspired.
It shows the resilience of the Maori people, their determination to keep their heritage alive.
And it brings so much to New Zealand's cultural landscape.
It's not just preserving the past, it's about weaving those traditions into modern life.
Exactly. You see it in their art music film, even their politics.
And we can't forget about their contributions to the world stage.
Right. Those incredible landscapes, the talented musicians and artists, the amazing athletes.
They've really made a name for themselves.
Size and isolation haven't held them back.
Not at all. Their story is one of ingenuity, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace change.
Absolutely.
So we've just scratched the surface here, but hopefully this deep dive has made you curious about New Zealand.
I hope so.
Maybe you're wondering about those economic reforms, or the impact of climate change, or the future of Maori culture.
Whatever you're interested in, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep discovering.
New Zealand is a country that defies easy categorization, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
I agree.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into New Zealand. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.